Okay, so we're now going to be talking about texture and pattern. So let's take a look at this comic strip right here, and it says so the guard is looking at the little old lady who's at the museum, and he says, "Oh, for Pete's sakes, lady, go ahead and touch it." So it's kind of, the joke is, and it's not really too much of a joke, but the thing is, we're attracted to texture. We want to touch it. Why do you think that when you go to the museums, they have to put sometimes felt ropes in front of paintings or sculptures, or that there's even guards to, tell people to back away from the painting? And it's because when we see texture, we want to go and touch it. We just do. I mean, try going to a clothing store, a jeans store, a shoe store, and look at the merchandise and not touch it. You have to touch it. We have to feel it. That's one of our sensory inputs. We need it. It's part of who we are, how we experience our surroundings. So that's the joke here with the museum and the guard. Okay, let's look at this boy's room, right? Obviously, he's into basketball and ladies, right? So the thing about this picture is that, yes, every individual photograph is a photograph of the face or a basketball player. But when we look at his room and we step back, it's quite textual. We see a menagerie of images, and it's texturized, his room. Okay, so pattern. Pattern, the repetition of a design motif. Pattern can be intricate, simple, blah, blah, blah. So look, what does a pattern need to be a pattern? What does it need? It needs something that repeats in a grid-like structure. It's predictable, and it's infinite. It can keep going on and on and on. Does pattern have a sense of texture? Yes, it can. But do all textures fall under the guise of pattern? No. Right, so here we have these women from Africa, and the way the continent of Africa, and the way they decorate their houses, right? And they use design, and there is a sense of pattern. So pattern begins with a unit or a shape that is repeated, right? And so here we have MC Escher, and you can see that there is a triangle. If I can move my mouse, there is a triangle that keeps repeating all around, and then it actually forms a hexagon. And then the hexagon connects to another hexagon. So what we call this in terms of pattern and design, we call that tessellation. So there is tessellation happening here. There is a pattern in weaving as well, in textiles. And even in here, we can see how this fire pit has a sense of patterning with the bricks. And so here are more examples. And also we have with Islamic art, where imagery is banned from sacred spaces, but the story of the Big Bang and the universe and the omnipresence of this all one being within many of these ancient religions, here they start off with a point that then the point expands and creates a universal pattern. It's actually kind of interesting. So texture, similarities and differences with pattern. So texture is something we want to touch. Pattern, maybe not. It's true. I don't always find myself reaching down to touch the patterns that I see on a floor with tile. Not necessarily. But texture is something we do want to reach out and touch. Texture is not regular. It doesn't repeat in a grid-like fashion. It's not predictable, right? Although here, this does have a sense of patterning, but this does not. We feel it to be patterned, right? But it's not, like our fingertips, or like the patterns in the water, in the beach, when you go to the beach and you see the patterns of the sand in the water in shallow areas from the waves. Right? We know what happens next, but each one of these lines are different. Each crinkle is different. Texture can be used as, I don't want to say a filler of space, but you can occupy all of a compositional space with an array of imagery, recognizable imagery, circles, dots, flowers. And the more you see it packed together, the more we feel it as, visually, we interpret it as a texture. And yet at closer look, you're like, oh, it's not texture. It's a bunch of little flowers or little bugs or hair or what have you. I mean, in here, there are like hidden faces of women. It could be mermaids. Here's a large woman's head on the floor, on the ground. It's like a reflection in a pond. Texture is especially important in the craft field, like jewelry, ceramics, furniture. But let's take a look at this photograph, right? With this photograph, and this is a very nice photograph, a black and white photograph. And let's look at how there is variety but harmony. So one of the things I'd start to ask is, so what is soft and what is hard? And we can look at the eggs up here and say, and the basket, it's soft. And we look at the rocks, it's hard. But in a black and white photograph or even a drawing, it's flat, right? We can't touch this photograph. So how do we interpret that it's smooth or that it's rough? And the answer to that is light. The way light dances and flows across the surface. Light and shadow play an integral part in how we see with our eyes and perceive the surface. Texture describes surface. And so here we have smooth fabric basket with smooth eggs and rough rocks. We also have a sense of repetition and harmony. Her shirt is round. It's like small, round, egg-like shapes. And her skirt has like jagged shapes that are jagged like the rocks. So you can see here there's a lot of rhythm and repetition, as well as variety. Soft and hard is variety. Sculpture screams to be touched. Yes, we want to touch sculpture. We want to touch high relief and low relief. We want to touch fabrics. So we have tactile, meaning you can actually touch it. And we have visual, meaning we interpret the roughness and the smooth, like the photograph. And impasto just means like very thick painting. Van Gogh really painted thickly. I mean, really thickly. He would just pour the paint right out of the tube, right on the canvas or right on his brush and just paint right on there. So when we look at Impressionist paintings and Post-Impressionist paintings, I mean, guards have to be on duty because you really want to touch the thick, gloppy paint that's on the canvas, So here we have a very high relief collage of painting right in here, right, by Thornton Dial. And let's keep going. Again, I'm just going to go through these images and slides. Architecture and landscaping. It uses a lot of varied textures, to be able to create variety and in the visual experience. So here we have like a building, right? We've got these rough stones. We got small, intricate tile roof. We have a smooth, right here, a very smooth side of the building. So that all adds variety. And it makes it pleasing to look at. It makes it dynamic, complex. Right? Okay, so collaging, which is what we're going to be doing with our texture pieces. But here we have some collaging, which means putting things together. But let's take a look at this piece again. What do we have repeating here? The shape that we have repeating here is the square. But we have a square with a square, another square, and each one of these squares has a square within a square. And we also see the negative of the square. See, right here is a little square right here, right there, right there, right there. So it's a very nice piece. It's very solid in the sense of it has variety, it has a smooth area to contrast with the rough area. And remember, contrast means difference. So creating differences creates visual intrigue, and it helps the viewer stay engaged in your design or your message, which is what you want to try and get across. We have folk art that you guys can go ahead and read on your own. And then visual texture is texture that we can't touch, but we can see what the fabric is, for instance, with this painting, like a satin dress. But it's a flat oil painting. And this is by Kurt Koper. Now, I did get the privilege of seeing one of these paintings at the end of a hallway when I lived in New York and worked in the fashion industry. I just did window displays, okay? But one of the fashion houses had one of these at the end of the hallway, and I thought it was an actual woman getting ready for a show or an evening out. It really looked believable. They're life size. But the fabric, the silk, you can see it. And how does a painter do that? Because, well, a painter does that through paying attention to light. It's how light dances on the surface, whether it's wool or satin. Texture as a design element. Yes, texture can be used as a design element. It's eye-catching. It does attract the viewer. And you can see here with this collage the different varied textures that are on there between hatching, cross-hatching, smearing, and of course solid areas of black and solid areas of white that are void of texture. That in itself is texture. Something very smooth is texture. Texture does not just mean it's rough. Texture means the surface quality. Trompe-l'oeil, French for fooling the eye, means it's so real you almost could pick it up. So it's really amazing what some artists can do with making things look so hyper real. Okay, some more examples. And we have even in sculpture, trompe-l'oeil. I mean, it's hard to believe that this leather jacket is made out of oil. Sorry, I just said oil. It's hard, let me do that again. You know, like this jacket. It's hard to believe that it's made out of clay. And yet it looks like leather. Amazing. Look at all the detail. The detail of the skin on that leather and the worn usage of it. And yet this is solid clay. This building is located by Prince Street, and I forget the cross street. But it's over in Soho in New York, and this whole side of the building is painted. So this is also like a trompe-l'oeil, and it fools the eye. There is actually one or two physical windows right here, but the whole building itself is an illusion. It's amazing. It's beautiful. Okay, everybody, that's the end of our slide presentation.